Hear again these words from Paul's letter to the Romans, just a few verses from this 5th chapter. We boast in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. Peter Gomes, who served for many years at the Harvard Memorial Church in Cambridge, told a story about a little girl in Sunday school, engrossed in what she was doing, with all of her crayons and with all of her might. Her teacher asked, what was she drawing? And the little girl said, I'm drawing a picture of God. But my dear, said the teacher, nobody knows what God looks like. To which the little girl replied, without interrupting the intense concentration on her work, they will when I'm finished. That sounds like a lot of little ones I know. And there's a sense in which the little girl's description of her task, to draw a picture of God, is what religion is about. And certainly it is what theology is about. To draw a picture of God is what one hopes and expects is behind this peculiar enterprise called the church. That's why we gather week after week, trying to draw a picture of God, trying to get a glimpse of who God is. And the faithful among us come knowing that God has already leapt from the picture we've drawn and lives among us. The Word has been made flesh and dwells among us full of grace and truth. And so for just a few moments this morning, I want to at least be half as bold and presumptuous as that little girl and at least attempt, or maybe suggest a picture, an image, a sketch of what God looks like. Lewis B. Smedes, in his wonderful little book, How Can Everything Be All Right When Everything Is All Wrong, writes, too many people I care about too much to let believing in God come easy. People close to me get cancer and die too soon. My prayers do not take away the pain or hold back the tolling of bells. My friends' marriages turn into battlefields, and their children go through 100 kinds of many struggles. God does not do many miracles for my crowd, and the pain of people in my little orbit are just for starters. Those starving children I pray for across the sea keep on dying, and the oppressed people I pray for keep on getting their heads banged and their freedoms choked. I'm not whimpering. I know we make many of our own miseries. I'm only admitting that when I believe that God cares, I feel a lot of hurt that tells me that God does not seem to care enough. Smead says, I can think of many arguments for God in my sleep. It's the feeling part that comes hard. The part that lets you know in the deep places of your soul that it is all right, even when your head tells you everything is all wrong. And I must confess, my sisters and brothers, that that is often my struggle. The feeling part that lets you know in the deep places of your soul that it is all right, even when your head tells you everything is all wrong. Even as I read this word in John's gospel about an advocate, the Spirit of truth that leads us in truth, the feeling part comes hard. The knowing that you know part comes hard. And Paul's promise, daunting promise, here in this 5th chapter of Romans, this daunting promise haunts me. Suffering produces hope, endurance. Suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. How can that be? How is this possible? How dare we say to those families who lost loved ones in the Egypt air crash this past week, how can we dare make that promise to them, those who have lost family and friends to hate crimes and gun violence almost daily in this country, or to our sister who's just lost her husband? Your suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. It sounds rather empty and hollow. It sounds like false hope. How can it be all right when everything is all wrong? We say it all the time. It's all right. A boy strikes out in a little league game and his coach says, "Son, that's all right." It's all right. It's all right. A baby cries in the night. It's all right, says the mother. A guest spills coffee on a clean tablecloth and the hostess says, "It's all right." But deeper than that, not just a crying baby or spilled milk or a missed ball, but life at its depths. When you are staring death in the face, how can it be all right? When your whole world is falling apart, how can it be all right? Is it just a cliche to say it's all right? Is it profound self-deception or uncommon truth? How can it be all right when everything is all wrong? Paul's promise haunts me. How will the suffering of Israeli mothers and Palestinian mothers mourning the death of their children produce character? Or the suffering of American parents mourning the deaths of their children shot down on school campuses produce hope? And the suffering of those parents and those children at our borders in the immigration crisis, caught up in our political paralysis, where is the hope there? Ernest Hemingway quipped that the world breaks everyone and that some grow strong in the broken places. Well, some do, but many don't. How is it that suffering can produce character and endurance and hope? But as I look further at this Romans passage, I think I see something that helps with a picture of God. The Apostle Paul had a saying. It was a commonplace pleasantry, a cliche, a trivial custom, a simple platitude. For most people, it didn't mean much of anything. It's just something you say in polite conversation. If you had been living in Paul's day, you would have heard it everywhere Greek was spoken. A man lifts a glass of wine to a stranger he meets in a bar, and he might say, "Here's grace to you." Or you might sign off on a letter to a person you despise, and you might say, "Well, grace be with you." It was just a stale, flip, silly little lie people used to awe the machinery of trivial conversation. It was just a commonplace saying, nothing more. It was like saying, "Good luck to you. Be cool. It's all right." Doesn't mean much of anything, just something you say in polite conversation. But Paul took this little anemic, commonplace saying, rescued it, gave it a whole new meaning. Nearly every letter he wrote, he opened it with "Grace be with you." He closed his letters with "Grace be with you." And here in this 5th chapter of Romans, Paul puts the theological spotlight on this word grace and dips it in with a whole new reality. And grace becomes the signal of God's assurance that life can be all right even when everything is all wrong. Grace becomes a kind of shorthand for everything God is and for everything God does in our lives. Grace is the picture of God. God looks like grace. And so when you want to talk about God, about who God is and about what God has done, all you have to say is grace. Grace makes it all right, even when everything is all wrong. And so I come this morning to offer the gift of grace. Grace, God's grace, not a cliche, not a word without meaning, not just another theological doctrine, but the very gift of God. Not an abstract theoretical idea, but not a trick or a ticket to some fantasy island, not some esoteric ethereal notion, not some pie in the sky in the sweet by and by, but grace is that which allows us to make it in the sour now and now. Grace is that which allows us to look at earthly reality with all of its problems and pain and perplexities, with all of its hurts and heartbreaks, with all of its sad and tragic edges and cruel cuts, and still be able to say and know at the very center of our being, it's all right. That's why we call it amazing grace. Grace, it's God's peace and presence and power. Grace is God's presence with us, full of grace and truth. And listen, my friends, it is in community. It is in community that we discover and experience this wonderful gift of amazing grace. Grace is not a gift that's handed down out of the clouds in a little neatly wrapped package with ribbons around it. It comes out of community. It comes out of relationships with others. As John Lennon reminded us, I get by with a little help from my friends. God has given us each other for the journey. There are times when you no doubt wonder why God gave you this particular group of miserable, faltering sinners to have to live with. If you don't, I've wondered that from time to time. If I'd done the choosing, I would have chosen a different group of people to live my life out with. You're not like me. We don't think alike on issues. We don't see things the same way. I don't understand why God has given me such an unlikely group of people as you, but God has. Sometimes I wish God had given me a group of people who could really understand me, be more compassionate toward me, love me a little more, but God knew I needed you. And I'm beginning to see why I need you. Christian community is not made up of the same kind of people. If God were to organize churches the same way we organize social clubs and political organizations, unions and professional societies, we would not have that person whom we need to help us to know and experience God's amazing grace. And I know from experience that hope rises strongest in those who do not suffer in isolation. We're created for life together. Joys are sweeter when we revel in them together. Pain shared will more likely make our broken places strong. So we need to hold on to each other as never before. I need you. You need me. We need each other to survive. Hezekiah Walker has that wonderful little song, I need you to survive. You need me. We're all a part of God's family, God's body. Stand with me. Agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It's God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. I pray for you. You pray for me. I love you. I need you to survive. I won't harm you with words from my mouth. I love you. I need you to survive. It is God's will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. Our offering the gift of grace to each other, being a grace-filled people with each other, or something happens. It's a mystery. Ubuntu, my humanity is caught up, is inextricably bound up in yours. We belong in a bundle of life. I am because you are. And together we see and experience the grace, the power, the peace, the presence of God. God becomes present to us. Paul promised endurance, character, and hope will be more likely grow in those whose suffering is shared. So let's hold on to each other. But my friends, at the heart of our Christian faith is a more radical, even more scandalous trust than that. God and God's self also suffers with us. The cross planted in the center of our faith is the high water mark of suffering. It declares that God descends with us to the depths of life. There is no pain that you can bear that I have not already embraced. There's no darkness that can overtake you that I have not already seen. There's no fear that might grip you that I have not known. I have passed through it. And when you pass through it, know that I am with you. Grace is promise. It is the mysterious power of promise to live as if you know tomorrow will be better than today, even though common sense gives you the odds that tomorrow will be the pits. But it is leaning and living into that promise. Harry S. Wright, pastor emeritus of the Cornerstone Baptist Church in Brooklyn, New York, shared the experience of growing up in a small rural community in Bennettsville, South Carolina. He said that his father was a big hog farmer. And one year, Dr. Wright said, when he was about 9 years old, his father had an unusually large, mean, evil, temperamental, big-bore hog to kill. And rather than trying to handle the hog himself, his father decided to call in a neighbor, an expert hog killer, to take care of the hog for him. The neighbor came with the hog locked up in a pen, loaded his gun, aimed, and shot the hog in the head. The hog fell down, but then he broke out of the pen and was headed for the open gate in the fence. Harry Wright said people started yelling, "Shoot him again, shoot him again, shoot him again. He's getting out. He's headed for the open gate in the fence." But his neighbor, the expert hog killer, never acknowledged the call to shoot him again. And he simply said, "That hog ain't going nowhere. I got off a good shot." And sure enough, the hog only went a few feet and rolled over dead. And what we must know today, my sisters and brothers, is that on a hill called Calvary, Jesus got off a good shot. And it only looks like Satan and evil and darkness and injustice and war and racism and sexism and death and destruction are headed for the open gate in the fence. But Jesus got off a good shot, and they ain't going nowhere. It's going to be all right. And because God got off a good shot, you can frustrate the will of God, but you can never stop it. You can slay the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. You can murder the prophet, but you can't stop the proclamation. You can excoriate the preacher, but you can't exterminate the gospel. You can stone people, but you can never stop God. The moral arc of the universe is long, and it bends towards justice. Right will win. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. God will rule. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. The wicked will cease from troubling, and the weary will be at rest. Weeping endures for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Grace always has the last word. God's amazing grace. And it's why I've got a feeling everything's going to be all right. I've got a feeling everything's going to be all right. Oh, I've got a feeling everything's going to be all right. Yeah, all right, all right, all right. Everything's going to be all right. Praise God.